All right, Parsha Shoftim. So this is going to be a little more text-based. We're going to read the Rishonim inside, see how they interpret some things. This is one of my favorite mitzvahs in this week's Parsha. On page 1026, 1711, Yud Zayin, Yud Aleph. It says, Al Pia Torah asher Yerucha, V'al Mishpat asher Yomer Lecha Taseh. According to the Torah which they teach you, and the statutes, whatever they say to you, you should do. Lo sasar min hadavar, asher yigidu lecha yamin u'smol. Do not veer from what they tell you, right or left. So, according to the Rambam, this is a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis. What the rabbis tell you to do, you have to listen. And this is a big, big debate amongst the Rishonim. Why do we have to listen to the rabbis? Right? When the rabbis get up and say, right, it doesn't say in the Torah to light Hanukkah candles. That was instituted by the rabbis in the Second Temple period. So you could say to them, well, why do I have to listen to you? You're not God. Who says you have the power to legislate new laws for the Jewish people that I should have to follow? So according to the Rambam, you look right here. The verse says here that according to the Torah which they teach you and what they tell you, you have to do. And don't veer from what they tell you left or right. So it comes out, according to the Rambam, that there's a positive commandment to listen to the rabbis, and there's a negative commandment to disobey the rabbis. Now,
but didn't the oral Torah come from Hashem also?
Right. So, but not the things like the Hanukkah candles, that wasn't around yet. So Hashem never told us to light Hanukkah candles, because at the time the Torah was given, Hanukkah didn't happen yet. We weren't saved from the Greeks.
So where do we learn to light Hanukkah candles?
So that was the rabbis said it. The rabbis
and where is it written?
That's in the Gemara, in the Talmud, in the Masechah Shabbos.
Did that all come from Hashem?
No. I mean, Hashem, the mitzvah of Hanukkah, lighting Hanukkah, did not come from Hashem. It's rabbinic. Invented by the rabbis. Now, the question is why do we have to listen to them? So according to the Rambam, this is the source. The Torah itself says you have to listen to what the rabbis tell you. Now, it doesn't just mean any rabbi who got ordained online or got ordained somebody. We can talk about that later, which rabbis it's talking about. We're going to learn the Rambam to see specifically which rabbis it's talking about. But when Hashem gave the Torah, He gave the power to the leaders of the Jewish people to make laws and ordinances and different, and to guide the Jewish people and to help them observe the Torah in the best way. And that was the power given over. Now the problem with this is, the Ramban asks in the Rambam very famously, well, if you tell me that this is referring to the Torah telling us to listen to the rabbis, well then it comes out that every rabbinic commandment is actually two biblical commandments. Right? We always have these two types of commandments. When you learn, we always divide things. What takes precedence, a rabbinic commandment or a biblical commandment? A biblical commandment, right. So the Ramban asks in the Rambam, well, if you're going to tell me the Torah says that you have to listen to the rabbis, it comes out that listening to the rabbis is more severe than many Torah commandments, because here, if you violate what the rabbis say, you neglected a positive commandment to listen to them, and you violated a negative commandment to not disobey what they said. So it comes out, let's say, if you don't light Hanukkah candles, you violated two Torah commandments. So it's actually worse to not light Hanukkah candles than not eat matzah. And the Ramban says that can't be. It's ridiculous. So they have a debate and they go on and on for pages, each one proving his point. Now the Ramban, you have to ask a question. Well, that's very nice. It's a very valid question you're asking on the Rambam, but according to you, why do you have to listen to the rabbis? Right? The Ramban holds that you have to light Hanukkah candles and you have to read Megillah and you have to do all the other rabbinic commandments. Well, what's the source? So that's discussed at length in the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, and they go back and forth. So I just wanted to introduce that a little bit. Now, according to the Ramban, what's this verse talking about? This verse is talking about Zakin Mamre. A Zakin Mamre is someone who's an esteemed rabbi, back in the day, from the top rabbis in the Jewish people. And after the Sanhedrin, the great rabbinical court, decides something, this fellow says, you're all wrong. Meaning after they already voted, and they came out, this great rabbi says, you're all wrong. Now, this is not someone to mess with. He's a great scholar. But he's called a rebellious elder, because he's not allowed, once the rabbis of the great court paskin something, you're not allowed to go against them, and he would actually get the death penalty for doing this. And we'll discuss why that's so severe. And that's what the Ramban learns that this verse is talking about. But either way, everyone agrees there is a requirement to listen to what the rabbis say. It's just a dispute between the Rambam and the Ramban where that commandment comes from. What's the source that you have to listen to the rabbis? Now, I wanted to go into more detail of the role of the rabbis in Judaism, and we'll go in the Rambam. So we're working with the... someone here?
It's not for us.
Oh, okay. Maybe they're new. No, they're here for back to school night. So we're working in the world of the Rambam, and again, he's the one who says that this pasuk in this week's parsha tells us that you have to listen to the rabbis. And it's going to be more text inside, so I would like to start reading that. So, Beis Din Agadol Shebiyushalayim. Again, I'm reading now from not in the Chumash. I'm reading from the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka. That's his. Before I was just quoting from the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvahs when he gives the rules of what's counted as a mitzvah. Now I'm reading from the Rambam in the Yad HaChazaka where he talks about the Jewish law, and he paskins the Rambam's halacha sefer pretty much. So he says, Beis Din Agadol Shebiyushalayim Heim Iker Torah Shebal Peh. The great court that was in Jerusalem, that is the main repository of Torah. Sorry, I almost said suppository. There was a rabbi once who was trying to use large words when he was speaking, and he was praising the shul he was speaking at, and he said it's a great suppository of Torah. So I almost just did that, and I'm very, very glad that I did it. So the Sanhedrin was a repository of Torah. Now that's right. You had different rabbinical courts. You go to monetary issues, you go to a rabbinical court of 3 judges. If there were more serious issues, there was a court of 23 judges. Now, the court, the Supreme Court of the Jewish people, that was the Sanhedrin, where you had 70 or 71 people, and the Supreme Court was located on the Temple Mount. And the Rambam starts off by saying that the Sanhedrin, that is the repository of Torah Shebal Peh, of the oral Torah, meaning this court is the one who guides the Jewish people in the transmission of Torah, and he's going to explain more. V'hem amudei hahora, they are the pillars of paskening. Umehem chok umishpat yotze l'kol Yisrael, and from them they pasken all the questions that come up, and they are the teachers of Jewish law to the entire Jewish nation. Now, we don't have this now, so we're going to discuss what changed from the times when we had the Sanhedrin and we had a temple, and that we don't have it now. Okay, but now he's talking about when we were in, when we talk about, we just had Tisha B'Av, right? We talk about what we lost, and we lost in the temple. We don't bring sacrifices, we can't get close to Hashem. We don't even realize we also lost the Sanhedrin. I mean, the Sanhedrin lasted actually longer than the temple, a little longer, but...
Which one did Yisro, he got on the Sanhedrin?
Yisro?
Yeah.
He gave Moshe the advice to start it, but I don't think he was on it.
Oh.
But he's... Well, he gave Moshe the advice to start different courts, but this was in Jerusalem. As long as there was a temple, and even a little after, you had this court of 70 elders that they were the ones that taught. They taught Torah Shebal Peh, and they paskined all the halacha questions that came up. Va'aleihem hefticha Torah.
How long were they north of Jerusalem? They were somewhere near Haifa.
Yeah, after they were. It could be after they were in the north. They were in Yavna after, I believe. They were exiled for a while. I think a couple hundred years after the destruction of Jerusalem, they were. They still existed, and they went from place to place. I don't remember where the final place was, but check it out.
So
It makes sense it was in the north, because that's where a lot of the Tanaim went after Jerusalem was destroyed.
I mean, there's a park east of Haifa.
Oh, yeah?
Where the Sanhedrin...
Oh, yeah, it could be. It makes sense. Totally makes sense. Okay. And then the Rambam quotes the verse that we just read. That's what the Torah says, that according to the Torah which they teach you have to do. It's a Torah mitzvah to listen to what the Sanhedrin says. So the Rambam is saying so far, it's only the Sanhedrin. This mitzvah to listen to the rabbis is only the Sanhedrin. So again, don't tell any of the Rabbanim in the community I said this, but if Rabbi so-and-so tells you to do something, there's no Torah commandment necessarily to do it. The only thing we found, my friend showed me that there's another sefer called the Sefer HaChinuch, who's lived a couple hundred years after the Rambam. He says that the Gadol Hador, meaning the greatest rabbi in the generation, there is a mitzvah to listen to him. So that would be like Rav Chaim Kanievsky or something. But the Rambam says that the only Torah commandment, it sounds like, to listen to the rabbis is on this Sanhedrin. Whoever believes in Moshe and the Torah, they have to rely on this. Whoever trusts in the Torah has to rely on this court. Anyone who doesn't do like this court says, Over below say you violate a negative Torah prohibition. Shenamar, it says lo saser mikol hadavar sheyagidu lecha yamin usmol, and he quotes the second part of the verse that you're not allowed to veer from what they say, right or left. Vein loken alav zeh. Okay, fine, easy. You don't get malchus for it. Shekol chacham shemar al divrei misasem bechenik, and he mentions what we said, that any scholar that is on that level of paskening who disagrees with the court, he would actually get killed. Now, what things do the rabbis teach us that we have to listen to? Now he's going to say, what are the rabbis responsible for? We said in general, the rabbis are responsible for paskening shilas, and they are the repository of Torah Shabbat Peh. So what does that mean? So, echad dvarim shalom duo samipia shmua. One are things that we learn pia shmua, vehem Torah Shabbat Peh, from person to person, let's say, through the tradition. Now, that usually refers to, we mentioned this I think a couple weeks ago, that how do we know when the Torah says pre-Eitz Hadar, you have to take a beautiful fruit on Sukkot, how do we know that that's an esrog? So that was the oral tradition that was passed down from Moshe from generation to generation until us, and every Jewish person shakes a esrog on Sukkot. So the reason we know that is because of the Torah Shabbat Peh. And this is one of the things that the Sanhedrin was in charge of transmitting accurately. That's one category. Now, the second level, that was level 1. Level 2 is something learned from a drasha. What's a drasha? So we have rules. I think they're called laws of hermeneutics, maybe? I forgot that. It's a very fancy English word. But you can derive things from verses in the Torah. There are certain rules that if you're reading the verses, you can derive laws from those verses. For example, it says, you have to honor your father and mother. So there's an extra word in that verse. It says es. Kabed es avicha v'asimecha. What's with the extra word? So the Gemara says that's to include an older brother, that you also have to honor your older brother in addition to your parents. So even though the Torah didn't say explicitly that you have to honor your older brother, it's learned from this rule. That's one rule. Another example is called a Gzera Shava. That's another one of the rules. That means if you have two separate parts of the Torah, different topics totally, except you find similar words used. So you're allowed to derive from part A to part B certain laws. And this is what you have in the Gemara. Them discussing, the Tanaim discussing, this rabbi applies this rule here, and this rabbi applies this rule here. Or there's something called the Kal V'chomer. That's another rule. Kal V'chomer is a fortiori, which I'm sure translation helps nobody, that it's a logical thing, that if I can lift 10 pounds, for sure I can lift 5 pounds. That's the logic of a Kal V'chomer. So for example, there's something called a Shor Muad, meaning there's different laws. If your animal attacks another person's animal, it depends if your animal is known as a angry animal, how much you have to pay. If it's an angry animal and you didn't watch it, then you have to pay more. So the rule is that after 3 times, then your animal has the status of a shor muad, as this angry animal. Now, the Gemara says that applies this type of logic, that you need 3 times for it to become a shor muad. So does it have to be 3? Can it be 3 times in one day, or does it have to be 3 times on separate days? So the Gemara applies the logic that, well, if we know that 3 times in 3 separate days, it becomes a shor muad, it has the status of this angry animal that you have to pay more. So all the more so, if it gored 3 times in one day, you'd have to pay. That's just an example of a kal v'chomer. But the general thing is here is that when the rabbis, they're the ones who apply the tools to verses in the Torah and how they to the laws, and that's something else that the Sanhedrin is in charge of, and you can't argue on. Now, those are 2 categories. Now the third category. That's something that the rabbis institute to make a fence around the Torah. According to what the time requires. And these are gezeros, which you can call injunctions, takanos are statutes, I guess, and minhagos are customs. So sometimes the rabbis would see something happening in the Jewish people. There was a certain mitzvah they weren't performing as best as they should be, and they would make laws. For example, muksa. There was a time in Jewish history, early on, when they saw that there were certain laws of Shabbos people weren't keeping properly. So what did they do? The rabbis got along and said, we're instituting a law called muksa, right? All of muksa is rabbinic. Nowhere in the Torah does it talk about muksa. And they said you're not allowed to move certain objects on Shabbos. Right. One of the reasons is, right, if you can't even move scissors, then we're not worried that you're going to cut, right? So the idea is that the rabbis are protecting the Torah laws, right? We're making a fence around the Torah that, you want to look over the edge, but if you get to the edge, you might fall off. So you make a fence so that you don't get close. And that's the third type. And also, this would where the Hanukkah candles would come in. This was more of a statute. This wasn't the Hanukkah candles weren't necessarily to protect a Torah law, but they were to institute something that we're thanking Hashem that we were victorious over the Greeks, or to read the Megillah. These are all laws. Or there's customs, like reciting Rosh Chodesh, Halal on Rosh Chodesh is a custom. Right? That's why you can't just say, very often people are like, oh, it's just a custom, I don't have to keep it. Well, no, certain customs actually fall under this rubric of where the rabbis are telling us we have to keep these laws, so they're very serious. So it says, and the Rambam is going to say that all of these laws in general, all these three categories, why do the rabbis make all of these laws? It's in general just to strengthen Judaism, right? The rabbis is such an integral part of Judaism because they are strengthening of the religion by making these enactments. The Rambam says it's a positive commandment to listen to it. So really, according to the Rambam, when you light Hanukkah candles, you're, in addition to doing the actual mitzvah of lighting Hanukkah candles, you also get a mitzvah of listening to the rabbis, according to the Rambam.
What about Shabbos candles?
Yeah, I think that's also, I believe that's also rabbinic. Yeah, to honor the Shabbos, you're doing something to honor Shabbos. Or, for instance, making kiddush is actually a biblical thing, but making kiddush on wine, that's something that the rabbis instituted. Many mitzvahs that we do are really rabbinic. Washing our hands before we eat, that's also rabbinic, right? Right, and sometimes you'll have discussions in the Gemara: is this mitzvah rabbinic or is it biblical? And go back and forth. Okay, we'll skip this. Now, what if you have rabbis that argue with each other? This is where the big difference comes between what they had then and what we have now, right? If you've noticed, rabbis disagree with each other, and you have, this rabbi says it's kosher, this rabbi says it's not kosher, this rabbi does it this way, this rabbi does it that way. What does Ram say here? Wrong part. Now, what if you have rabbis arguing? They have this dispute about a topic. What do? You go after the majority. There's a concept in Judaism, you go after the majority. Same thing. If you have 3 pieces of meat, 2 are kosher and 1 is treif, you're allowed to eat it. Because the majority of pieces are kosher. You're allowed to go to the majority. So same thing with rabbis. If you have 2 rabbis say that it's okay, and 1 says it's a problem, you can say it's okay. So when you had the Sanhedrin, you had these 70 rabbis, then you go after the majority. And you follow the majority. Imro miktasan sheroy ligzar gezera or letakin takana or sheinicho ha'ama min hagazeh v'ro miktasan she'en roy ligzar gezera zu v'lo letakin takana v'lo lahaniach min hagazeh nosim v'nosim elu keneged elu v'holchem acharuban v'matzina davar acharam. And what would happen? Let's say you have a group of rabbis that say, we want to make a new rule in Judaism, and some say, well, we don't think that's a good idea. What would they do? They would discuss it with each other, and after discussion they would take a vote. And whoever voted, that was it. You had the Sanhedrin. If the majority of the Sanhedrin held one way, that was it. You can't argue. It's done. You're not allowed to go and hold like you do, right? You learned the topic in the Talmud, and you are positive that this is the right way, except most of the rabbis say not. You're not allowed to go against them. You have to do what they say, even though you think they're wrong. That's when we had a Sanhedrin.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that's the big difference. Now that we don't have a Sanhedrin, that's why we have this, right? We don't have this great court of 70 elders that decide every issue. So now all we can do is we each have a rabbi who we trust, and we ask him questions, and they tell us what to do, and everyone has their rabbi. So it's going to come up that there are going to be disputes. Now there are still rules of how to paskin, right? It's not just a free-for-all. There are certain rules that the Talmud has of how to decide a halachic matter. That's why you need to have a rabbi that is well versed in these rules to do the right thing. But when you had a Sanhedrin, it was uniformity in Judaism. Everyone was doing the same thing because you appealed to the Supreme Court and they decided, and there was no questioning after the fact. Right, and he's going to continue and talk about that. He says, "Kishihi bezdin hagadol kayim lo haisa machlokas b'Yisrael." That's what he says. When we had this great rabbinical court in Jerusalem, there was never dispute. There were not disputes in the Jewish people. There wasn't machlokas because everything got decided. Alakol din shenolad b'safek le'echad miyisrael. Anytime a Jewish person had a question, shoyel lebezdin shabiru, he would go to the rabbinical court in his city and he would ask them. Im yadu amrlo. If that rabbinical court, the small rabbinical court, knew the answer, they would tell him. If not, harei hashoel. Im oso bezdin or im shlucho olin Yerushalayim. They would send that bezdin. They would ask another bezdin, or that bezdin would send the question to the bezdin, the great rabbinical court in Jerusalem, v'sholin lebezdin shebahar bais, and they would ask the rabbinical court on the Temple Mount. Im yomdu amrulo im lav hakol boin lebezdin shal pesach hazara. Im yadu amr lahem v'im lav hakol boin lishkas hagaz lebezdin hagadol v'sholim. Oh, I guess. Then, if they didn't know, they would go to the great rabbinical court in the Lishkas Hagazes near the Temple Mount. Or there were two rabbinical courts. There was one on the Temple Mount, and there was one even closer, I believe. So now, what happens if you go to the top rabbinical court and nobody knows? Im haya davar shenoilid bo asafek lakol. Now, let's say nobody knows. Yodei etzel bezdin hagadol. Ben mipia kabbalah, ben mipia midah, shadana bo aimer miyad, im lo haya davar bar etzel bezdin hagadol, danim bo b'shaitim. Then they would discuss the halachic issue. Everyone would talk about it. V'noisen. They would talk about the topic. V'darachis kimu until they all agreed. Or yamdu leminyan v'yelchu acharov. Or they would take a vote and would go after the majority. V'yomer l'chol hasholim kach halacha v'holchen lahem. And after they decided, they would tell the person who asked them, "This is the halacha. And this is what you have to do." Mishabatel bezdin hagadol. Now, since once this court got destroyed and we don't have it anymore, Rav Samachlokas b'Yisrael, there came to be a lot of disputes in the Jewish people. Zemetame v'nos and Talmud Dvar. This rabbi would feel that you'd have an object. Is it pure or is it impure? One rabbi would say it's impure. He would have valid reasons. Another rabbi would say it's pure. He would have valid reasons. And this one would say it's forbidden. This one would say it's permitted. And that's what would happen. But the thing is that when we had this great rabbinical court, they would make a decision and we would follow what they said. But nowadays that we don't have this, now that's why we have so many disputes. This rabbi says this and this rabbi says that. Now then he goes on to say that one of the rules is that, we were talking about the difference between rabbinic laws and biblical laws. So now what do? So usually it's not this simple, but let's say you go to one rabbi and he says, that's forbidden. You go to another rabbi and says, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. So the rule is if it's rabbinic, that means you're allowed to be lenient because we take rabbinic laws less seriously in a certain sense. And if it's a biblical law, you have to be stringent. But that's usually it's not that clear cut.
So you're allowed to shop with rabbi?
No, you can't do that. Mishnah says aseh lecharab. You have to find a rabbi. It says that if you do like the leniencies of Beis Hillel and the leniencies of Beis Shammai, you go just try to find leniencies. The Gemara calls you a rasha, an evil person. But you have to have a rabbi you trust who knows the halacha well and will give you an honest answer. But yeah, you can't rabbi shop. It's no good. Don't rabbi shop.
Can't rabbi shop.
Can't rabbi shop.
But a rabbi, if a community has a minhag,
Yeah.
and the rabbi doesn't follow it,
The rabbi should follow the community minhag.
but they don't. But I know where my family's from, they don't.
It could be. You usually there's a Mishnah in Pesachim that says you're not supposed to do against the community custom because it could cause a fight. Now, it depends what it is. It could be...
I mean, in this case, it's how many hours between meat and...
Oh, like he's German or something. Oh, yeah. I think people say in, like, America, in Europe, you had, like, a city where everyone had a custom for, like, the past, 1,000 years, because the families all lived in that city, and they all had certain customs. I think they say in America there's no such thing as, like, a custom of a city, just because everyone's so mixed up and everything.
So if you're from Germany, and you're living in America, how many generations is it before you say, well, you're still following the German custom?
Yeah, well,
the Dutch custom.
Well, they were saying the point is in America you could do that because there's no custom of America because it's a melting pot and we all came from different places, so there's no custom that takes precedence. Now, there are certain times it does happen. For instance, Svira is a good example. Some people shave the first half, some people don't shave the second half, right? So, is there any community custom? No, not really, because everyone came here doing different things. But in Yeshiva Lane, right, in Baltimore, in Eretz Yisrael, it's a self-contained community of just people in yeshiva. So the Rosh Yeshiva said that the whole yeshiva has to keep the second half because it was like a self-contained Jewish community. And he said that even if your custom is to not shave during the first half, you can't shave during the second half because of you shouldn't change from the custom of the yeshiva because it's like a self-contained thing. But usually it's like very rare you have that. There's a story I just heard with Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky when I think Rav Heinemann said he's the head of the Star K. I heard him say that they were trying to pick a rabbi for a certain shul in Toronto, and it's probably like the 1930s, I think it was. And nobody, they had the rabbi give a speech. There were 3 candidates. Each rabbi gave a speech, and people in the congregation didn't know anything. So they just decided whatever rabbis, they were going to take the old rabbi's hat, and whoever fit the hat was going to get the job. So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, his head fit the hat, and he got the job. And I think when he got there, they gave him, some people wear gartel, they tie a string around themselves when they daven, so that's a custom. So it wasn't his custom, but I think they gave him their old rabbi's gartel, so it wasn't his custom, but to make the people feel good, he kept the community custom. So it depends, what it is, something like that, if you want to make people in the shul feel good, it always depends. Each issue, it's really a case-by-case issue. Okay, oh wow. I wanted to don't have time. Okay, there's a Ramban on this topic. I wanted to talk about this. Actually, we're not going to get to it, but I want to give this out just anyway. This is worth reading. There's a mitzvah later in the parsha that a Jewish king is not allowed to be haughty. So the Ramban says that there's a mitzvah to not be a haughty person, and this is a letter that the Ramban wrote to his son when he was living in Israel. When he moved to Israel, and he told his son to read it once a week. And the Art Scroll has a great edition called The Letter for the Ages, but I just printed off the English. It's really good to read, but I thought we would get to it, but we're not. But I want to stick on this rabbis thing a little more, because it's a really cool story. The Ramban, on this parsha, it says, don't veer from what the rabbi said, right or left, from your right or left. So what's with the choice of words there, right or left? So he writes, from a Sifri, quoting Rashi, Afilu im omer lecha al yamin shehu smol, even if the rabbi tells you that your right hand is the left, or your left hand is right. Ve'inenu ve'inyano. So what does that mean? Meaning you even have to listen to the rabbis if he tells you your right hand is left or your left hand is right. Ve'inyano afilu tachshov b'libcha shehem toim. Even if you think the rabbi is making a mistake. Ve'adavar pashut be'necha kasher ata yedei ben yamincha smolcha. And you know the rabbi is making a mistake, just as you know you're right from your left. Ta'aseh k'mitzvasam. There's still a mitzvah to do like they say. He says like this. The rabbi tells you that you know this piece of meat is kosher, but the rabbi says, you know the piece is treif. The rabbi says, don't worry, you can eat it, it's kosher. He says, don't worry, just eat the meat. Or he says, you're the executioner, and you know the guy's innocent, but the rabbi tells you, kill the guy. He says, you have to kill the guy. Now again, it's a big disclaimer, this isn't talking about rabbis nowadays. This was talking about when we had the rabbinical court. So just don't, if you know something's treif and the rabbi tells you it's fine and you just know that, you saw someone mixing milk and meat or something together, then don't eat it. But rather, this is what he commanded. We have a mitzvah to listen whatever they tell us. Now it says, this is like the story of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Gamliel b'Yom Kippurim. Oh, we'll get to that in a second. Now, what's the point of this? Why do you have to listen to the rabbis to the point where even if you're positive they're wrong, you still have to listen to them? The need for this mitzvah is very great. The Torah was given to us. God knew that human beings have different minds, and we're not going to agree with everything. We're not going to agree on everything with each other. And obviously, people have different opinions. You're going to have fights. But Torah, Kama Torahs, and it will happen, you'll have several Torahs instead of one Torah, because you have everyone doing whatever they think the right thing is. So therefore the Torah said you have to listen to the rabbinical court, whatever they decide. Because Hashem knew people have different opinions, and if you just let it to every single individual to decide what he thinks the halacha should be, then you would just have many, many Torahs. And that's really the ideal way that Judaism should be. We should really have a temple. We should have a bezdin where they can paskin and decide all the halachic issues. Now, just to conclude with a story here, it's from a Mishnah. Now, the Ramban mentioned this. He says, just like the story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yeshua, what is the story? I would like to read the story from the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. You might be very surprised. Question is, where am I starting from? So there, back in the day, they used to, when you have Rosh Chodesh, they used to sanctify the month. Witnesses would come and say, I saw the new moon, and the Bezdin would say, now's the new month, when we saw the moon. So you could have a difference of opinion, right? Depending when the moon was sanctified and the new month started, could depend when the holidays are going to fall out. Yom Kippur, right? When you would find the new moon for Tishrei, 10 days after that would be Yom Kippur. So it really depends a great deal of when witnesses would see the new moon. So we'll start here. So Ma'aseh Shebo Shnayim v'Amru. So now 2 witnesses came and said that there's the moon is whenever it is, and one rabbi felt that they were liars, and Rabbi Gamliel accepted their testimony. I'm skipping here. So Rabbi Yeshua agreed with the opinion that said these witnesses were liars, that the new moon was not sanctified. Shalach Rabbi Gamliel Gazruni alecha shetavu etzli b'makav b'masach b'yom kippur m'shechalias b'cheshboncha. So Rabbi Gamliel said, Rabbi Gamliel was the one in charge. He was the head of the great Bezdin. He told Rabbi Yeshua, right? They had a different count when Yom Kippur was going to be. Rabbi Gamliel told Rabbi Yeshua, I want you to come with your wallet and with your stick on the day that you believe is Yom Kippur to my Bezdin, because they were keeping Yom Kippur on different days. Halachu matzah Rabbi Akiva. He found Rabbi Akiva Meitzar. He was very bothered. Rabbi Akiva. Amar lo. Rabbi Akiva said to Rabbi Yeshua, Yeshli lilmod shekol ma she'asa Rabbi Gamliel asay. Whatever Rabbi Gamliel does, you have to listen to him. Shenamar, the pasuk says, Elimod Hashem Mikra Kodesh. Okay, he quotes a verse saying that the moon is only sanctified when the Bezdin declares it sanctified. Bola etza Rabbi Dosa ben Horkanes Amar lo. In bom anulad nachar Bezdin sham Rabbi Gamliel tzrichon anulad nachar. He went to Rabbi Dosa. And Rabbi Dosa told Rabbi Yeshua, if you don't listen to Rabbi Gamliel, we're going to have to question every Bezdin from the time of Moses until now. Meaning Rabbi Gamliel says that you have to go visit him with your wallet in hand and basically violate Yom Kippur. You have to go. So what did he do? Nato maklo umaosav. He took his walking stick and his money, biyado, v'halach liyavne. He went to Yavne. Etzel Rabbi Gamliel to Rabbi Gamliel. Biyom shechal Yom Kippur Mlios b'cheshbono. So the day that, according to his count, that it was Yom Kippur, he took his wallet and he took his walking stick and he went all the way to Yavne, which is obviously prohibited in Yom Kippur, to see Rabbi Gamliel. Amar Rabbi Gamliel stood up when Rabbi Yeshua walked in. V'nashku al rosho. He kissed him on his head. Amar lo bo b'shalom. He said, come in peace. Rabbi v'talmidai, my teacher and my student. Rabbi b'chachma, you're my teacher in wisdom, meaning you're wiser than me. V'talmidi shekabalta es dvarai, and my student because you listen to my words. I mean, the Ramban is citing this story that even though Rabbi Yeshua believed in his heart of hearts, and according to his halachic analysis, that today is Yom Kippur, but what superseded that was that Rabbi Gamliel said that no, we are the Bezdin in charge, and we have to have one Torah for the Jewish people. So therefore, you have to come on the day you believe is Yom Kippur with your money and walking stick. And when he came, Rabbi Gamliel gave him a kiss and said, "You're my Rebbe because you know more than me, and you're my Talmud because you accepted the words of the Bezdin." And that's really the ideal way the Jewish people should be. We have one Jewish court in Jerusalem which decides all these issues, so that we don't have these machloksim. What's very interesting, even though there are so many customs nowadays in the Jewish people, the main things are the same, right? The big things are the same. Yemenite Jews, which had very little contact with the rest of us, we all have pretty much the same tefillin, the same, again, we all take an esrog and a lulav and, talis, and the structure of davening, we all have a Shemona Esrei, and besides like some changes in the order of like Pesukah de Zimra, or a few words here and there, the main parts of Judaism are pretty much the same, which is really remarkable. When you think about it, but we do have different customs and different halachas that came out, and we do have there are certain you see certain remnants of this idea, right? We have a Shulchan Aruch, a code of Jewish law, and we have the Talmud. You will not find a Orthodox rabbi worth his salt the Rambam actually says this. You cannot argue on the conclusion of the Talmud, right? You can't say that I disagree with the Talmud, right? There's a certain things in the Jewish people that are. To be a Jew nowadays, you have to follow that, and that's also with the Shulchan Aruch and its commentaries. You're not going to find someone, Orthodox rabbi worth his salt, who will argue on the Shulchan Aruch and its commentaries. So there are certain things that were accepted amongst the Jewish people, but the real ideal is to have this Jewish court in Jerusalem. Any questions? Good. It's hot in here again. All right, Shkar, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good night.